Right, we're recording. Should we go?
Yes!
Hello and welcome to Front End Chatter, Britain's most infuriatingly infrequent motorcycling podcast. Blame him, Martin Fitzgibbons.
And him, Simon Hardgleaves.
And in case you've forgotten, or you're new around here, we are a pair of motorcycle journalists peddling fake news since, in my case, 1992, and in his case, I want to say 2003.
Beautiful.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Hey, check me. Basically, there isn't a bike that hasn't been built
That we haven't not ridden.
that we haven't not ridden in the last 3 decades, that we haven't scrutinised, cannibalised, bastardised, mummified, stratified, objectivised, subjectivised, emphasised or hyperbolised. But, Mufka, the one thing we never do, the cardinal rule of motorcycle writing, is we never, ever personify. You know the kind of thing. This bike is like a hot chick with bad intentions. She sucks you into the seductive curves and then wham, you go down like a sack of hot jizz. Spend the rest of your life paying for it.
I see you've been subscribing to
44 teeth. But we're never afraid here on Front End Chatter to break with convention. So here we go. This is motorcycling as family members.
Oh, okay.
So, the head of the family, we have BMW, the father figure. High performance, luxury, technically sophisticated, all-conquering, domineering, multi-skilled, heated grips. Used to be quite adventurous, but today he's basically an armchair on wheels. I'm thinking R1300 GSA. And then there's the real boss, Mum, the power and the toilet duck behind the throne, the one who gets stuff done, but who's also caring, nurturing, reliable, there when you need it. Clearly, she's a Honda VFR 750, or these days maybe an NT 1100. Bit mumsy. Your best mate is a Suzuki, probably a GSX-R 750, maybe an SV 650. You just get on really, really well. No demands made, just mates, you know? Your pain in the ass siblings, obviously, Kawasaki ZX-10R, the older brother, bit better than you at everything, but really you both know he isn't. And Yamaha's MT-01 is your older sister, who all your mates seem to fancy and you've absolutely no idea why.
Very confused thoughts.
Meanwhile, we have Ducati's Panigale V4S, any Ducati sports bike, as your loud, embarrassing uncle who's in his 50s but dresses like a teenager and goes around with someone half his age. Nan and Grandad, clearly a Moto Guzzi V85 and a Harley Davidson. I don't need to explain why. And then the Aprilia Tuono V4 is your fit cousin you fancy the arse off, but sadly this isn't Mississippi in the 1950s, which only leaves...
But it is Lincolnshire in the 2025s.
Okay, anything goes. Which leaves the question, who am I?
Who are you, Simon? Who are you?
And who are you? If you were a motorbike, who would you be?
Oh, God. Well, I am... What am I? I am not very quick. I'm getting on a bit. I'm a bit heavy. I do a bit of everything, but none of it especially brilliantly. Okay. My remit is kind of broad, but not very deep.
Yeah.
More introvert than extrovert. Easily forgotten about, which is kind of how I like it. I enjoy wheelies and good fuel economy.
Oh, there's a dichotomy there, isn't there?
I'm a bit wobbly in corners.
Extrovert, introvert.
I'm also quite cheap.
Yeah.
I'm pretty... reliable and trustworthy and mostly get the job done without much fuss or excitement. I, Simon, am a Kawasaki Versys 650.
Oh, do you know, I thought you were going to say SV then. You're a Kawasaki. Oh, Versys 650.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's
maybe a first, maybe a second gen. Probably not the current one. Bit too jazzy.
It's a bit too show-offy.
You, Simon. I mean, you're a K5 if ever I've seen one, aren't you?
Oh, that's nice. I thought you were going to say K.
Had its moment in this.
Yeah.
And at the last of the analogues.
That was it, wasn't it?
Struggling to make the transition.
I thought you were going to say K1300S or
okay.
Yeah.
Now, what have you got? What have you self-diagnosed as? What do you self-identify as?
Fast enough, but not too fast. Versatile all-rounder. Practical, still a bit clunky in places. Not quite as flash as you thought in real life. Triumph. I thought it'd be a Triumph Tiger 800 Sport, just to bring it up to date.
Oh, how very contemporary.
Yeah, I thought that's kind of me down the middle. I was thinking, anyway.
I suspect there's going to be more talk about Triumph Tiger 800 Sports later on.
There is, yeah.
Seeing as I still haven't got close to one, and you have investigated it inside out.
Yes,
much like your cousin.
That sounds a bit rude. Yeah, I have. I've sublimed. I've integrated. What is it? What's the Flann O'Brien? The third policeman, isn't it? The third policeman.
I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about.
No, I haven't either.
Good,
but it's about the idea that you exchange atoms with something.
Oh, I see.
You become, when the policeman rides the bicycle, a little bit of the policeman becomes the bicycle and a little bit of the bicycle becomes the policeman. Something like that. Anyway, in this little biking family scenario, you all know what they do on a Sunday. They all go to church and pray to the great Lord Almighty, the all-seeing, all-knowing eye in the sky, Britain's best and brightest bike insurers, Bennetts. Yes, folks, Front End Chatter is brought to you via the munificence of Lord Bennetts. You've heard of them, the only bike insurers who actually give a stuff about motorcycling and motorcyclists. That's you and me and thee and everybody. And how do we know this is a fact? Because you show me any other insurers who gives as much back to motorcycling as Bennetts. I mean, we have bikesocial.co.uk, an entirely free website dedicated to bringing you the bike news, the road tests, the features, the used bike info. And then there's Bennett's Bike Social YouTube channel, stuffed with road tests and features and amazing consumer info. If you're buying kit or security devices or maintenance stuff for your bike, check to make sure you're spending your hard-earned on the right product. Speaking of which, Bennetts are a driving force behind persuading online retailers like Amazon, maybe, to stop selling fake riding kit. And I believe there is a petition ongoing that we mentioned on the last FEC.
There is. We mentioned it briefly. The living legend Paul Varnsbury set up a petition to try and get the UK government to do something about the wave of illicit, untested, non-certified riding kit that is available to be purchased through social media and all sorts of online retailers, and it is illegal and it is dangerous and it needs to stop. So the petition is up to, I think, about 4,000 signatures. It needs to get to 10,000 before the government will at least acknowledge it. If you haven't already, please sign the petition at bit.ly/stopbadkit.
Good. All for a good cause, I think. Excellent. Right. Now, we've been away for a while, about a month, I think.
You might have noticed, yeah.
What the devil have you been up to and what we've been up to while we've been off air?
I actually got to ride some bikes, Simon.
Good Lord.
I actually got to ride some bikes. It feels like the riding season has actually begun in earnest. And rather than most of the winter where I seem to be sitting on my arse and staring at a computer screen and playing Farming Simulator 22, now I've actually had keys to motorbikes and been out and done stuff.
Yeah, what have you been
Can I give
riding?
you a quick run through?
Go on, go for it.
Really quick. Right. Current issue of Bike Magazine has a piece I wrote for them called Tortoise versus Hare, a two-bike feature involving a long ride on two bikes at opposite ends of the sports tourer spectrum, BMW's S1000 XR and Honda's NT1100. That was quite eye-opening, if for no other reason than I surprised myself with the bike I preferred at the end of it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think we can see where that's going. It was the XR, clearly.
The current issue of MCN, this week's MCN, has a two-bike test called Economy Class, a comparison between Honda's updated NC750X DCT and Kawasaki Z7 Hybrid. I can see that is right up your street, Si.
Eyes glazing over.
At first, they seem quite different things, but they both were built with the idea of saving fuel. They're both the same length, the same weight. They both have parallel twins that make the same horsepower. They both have self-shifting gearboxes and no clutch lever. But they go about their job in different ways. And so we put them together, especially kind of newsworthy, because the Honda is new for this year or updated for this year. And the Kawasaki has just seen a massive price decrease from Kawasaki. So when the Z7 Hybrid came out last year, it was about 12 grand.
Yeah.
Kawasaki have done a spring promotion. It's about 7 now.
I'm sorry, I'm just calculating that. So let me see. I was one of those people who I believed in you, Kawasaki. I went out and I bought one when they were first announced. I put my hard-earned money down, and now you've just undercut my used values. I mean, what's my PCP going to be worth now?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I did have a look at the PCP quotes, and the projected future values seem to still be based on it costing 12 grand.
Because they haven't caught up yet.
Yeah.
Oh, my God, what a nightmare. Anyway, okay.
So, I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a new bike be discounted that much that quickly.
No.
I think that might be a record in my motorcycling lifetime.
Yeah, that's
Less than 12 months, probably 40% off the price.
Did anybody actually buy one at the start? Because you did look, didn't you?
I don't know. That's a good question.
That's...
If you've bought, I mean, I have seen someone who's bought one actually, genuinely through little local market town, and I saw a Z7 hybrid ride past, and it wasn't me. I wasn't having an out of body experience. But yeah, people have now. That might be because they are now so cheap.
That's
because
possible.
The PCP, because the future value is based on what it should cost.
Be, yeah.
It's like $6,000 or $5,000 3 years down the line. The difference between what the dealer can sell it for now, 7, and what it's worth in the future, 6 or whatever, is so tiny that the PCP deals are crazy. They're like less than 50 quid a month.
Yeah.
So if you do want, to get one, now is the time to get one, because that's a lot of bike for 50 quid a month.
However, I would draw listeners' attention to the second adjective you used to describe both of those bikes, which I think was long.
They are quite long.
Yeah, it's not a good sign when that's the second thing you have to say about the comparison between two bikes.
Anyway, if you want to know which is faster, which is more fun, which is
longer,
better on fuel,
I want to know which one's longer and shorter. That's all.
They're the same length. Then that is this week's MCN, April the 2nd, and last but not least, the latest issue of Ride. I did something that didn't involve riding bikes. It was a piece about motorcycling and well-being, investigating to what extent riding a bike can improve your fitness and your brain fitness, or your mental health, as trendy people call it these days. Involved talking to a number of people, including a PhD-level sports scientist, mental health charity founders, and looking at scientific papers. And one of the people I got in touch with, someone who sits on that very, very wafer-thin Venn diagram intersection between motorcycling and fitness.
And a third circle, which is people I respect.
Yeah, and want to talk to. Is a former colleague of both of ours, Jane Amorby. Jane is a Former ambulance driver. Former ambulance driver.
She did drive it like a Formula car, probably, yeah.
Was a household name in the 90s as Rio on Gladiators, became a motorcycle journalist in the 2000s, was part of a couple of Bike magazine group tests.
Yeah.
And is now a strength and nutrition coach. She knows her stuff. Even more perfect for that is that her focus now is on helping midlife folk like you and me, who could just perhaps do with a bit of motivation and a steer in the right direction, rather than some mental Joe Rogan gym bro thing, all full of testosterone and, creatine or whatever they do these days. But no, this is just kind of real world, real life, personalized nutrition. And I have been to a gym. I was trying to think about this. I think I've been to a gym twice in my life. Once, I think, when I was at uni. So that would have been 25 years ago. And I went on a Saturday morning and I walked straight out and was immediately violently sick. So I didn't go back for about 15 years.
Right. Okay.
And then I think I was in a hotel, maybe with my partner at the time, might have been for my brother's wedding. And the hotel had a gym. And she sort of said, well, let's go and use the gym. And I was like, do we have to? And I turned up and sort of half-heartedly moved some stuff around and went back to the room and thought, what a horrible thing for people to do.
Awful experience.
Why do people do this? But apparently there is a reason to do it. So I'm not a fitness freak, clearly, but Jane mentioned a group program she's about to start. It's kind of mostly done over Zoom and phone apps. And by the time she'd finished explaining why it was important for me to do it, I was absolutely sold on it. And I was all set to join up on this kind of group thing. But unfortunately, the timing doesn't quite fly for me. It begins on the 21st of April, and it's a 6-week course, which means it overlaps with Highland Fling 1 and 2. And I couldn't, with a straight face, be downing ciders and eating burgers in the evening and pretending I was doing anything to do with health and fitness. But if you, dear listener, fancy getting involved, it's well worth checking out janeamorby.com, Jane, OMOROGBE.com, or Jane Amorby Coach on Instagram. She's a mega rider. She's fab company. And what she's doing is perfectly targeted at us lot.
I've got a secret about Janie that you don't know and that she doesn't know.
Oh, yeah.
So I went with
that she doesn't know.
Yeah, she doesn't know either.
Okay.
So I went on a group test with her early days back in 2000 and I want to say 5. It might have been 6, 5.
Sprint ST?
Yeah, went up to Scotland with her, with Pete Boast and Simon Weir, and she rode like a demon. It was really, really good fun. And at the time, I weighed probably not as much as I do now, but it was quite a lot. I was about 16 stone, I think. I was a big old lump. And I came back and I looked at the photos and she'd been talking about fitness and all that kind of stuff. She was part of the inspiration that made me go running and shed a load of weight and get down to something like 12, 11 and a half stone or something in 6 months. And it's pretty much down to her.
Oh, wow.
Well, not down to her. It was
but she kind of provided a bit of...
part of the motivation.
Yeah.
So, if she can motivate me remotely all those years ago, she'll motivate you now.
Yeah. She's top because, she is inspiring and motivational, but without that kind of army drill sergeant shouting down your neck type.
She's quite scary, though.
Oh, yeah. I'm not suggesting she's not.
You don't get to be a Rio on Gladiators without
undefeated on duels. Yeah. I mean, I'd say still, but I don't think she's been...
Oh, is that the pugil stick?
Yeah.
The cotton bud thing.
That's it.
Yeah, she's good with the cotton bud, isn't she?
Yep.
Yeah, you got to be careful. She's actually kept that. Were you with me? It was on the wall of her house. I went around because she... She was
racing as well, wasn't she?
Racing.
She did the no budget cup. But I think you can beat
And
her.
I went over to Belgium, and there was her and her partner, and we were looking around. She shows around the house, and there's the pugil stick on the wall that she'd nicked from Gladiators because she was undefeated. That was her trophy.
Oh, tremendous!
Good stuff. Anyway, right, enough about Janie and being fit. So there's something else you've been doing. Actually, you have been out with that there Bennett Spike Social doing the YouTubes with the Michael Mann on Hornet.
I have.
CB1000 Hornet SP, I think it was.
Witness the fitness. Yeah.
What other bikes did you have with it?
There was the CB1000 Hornet SP, there was the Triumph Street Triple 765 RS, and there was the Kawasaki Z900 SE. So these are kind of the premium economy, premium middleweight. I mean, they're not even middleweights. It's just a nonsense word now. They're premium, sporty, naked roadsters.
That'll do.
They're not super nakeds.
Yep.
And they're kind of similar-ish price, although that's a key part of the discussion. I guess what they all have is they're like the plus models. So they all have Olin shocks and they all have Brembo brakes, and they kind of approach sporty, naked road riding in different ways. But yes, the main bit of that story is probably the Hornet SP with its ridiculous price. You've also been spending a bit of time with Hornets.
I have, yeah. I talked briefly about... excuse me, the last one on the last front end chatter. I did 500 miles up to the Pennines, around the Pennines, and back again in a day in February for Ride magazine. I think that issue might still be on sale. I'm not sure. It's probably close to going off sale. But anyway, if you can get it, do. It was cold and it was wet, and I should have hated every second of it, but I loved it. Had a classic Honda riding position, ergonomically perfect. And blowing my own trumpet, the other day I was reading the technical briefing from the launch, which I didn't go to, and there was this line that said, natural, welcoming ergonomics for all riders with a classically Honda at-home feeling. I thought, yay! I was impressed with myself for saying the same thing.
Very good. But you also wrote the press kit, so...
I did not. But it made me wonder, actually, do you think they've got like this big box of cardboard riding position triangle templates in Osaka?
Yes.
And they just pull one out and they go, here, make it, they hold it up to their prototype and go, make it like this.
Fit this.
Yes. I kind of wonder, actually, it did make me wonder if you could...
What, and it will turn out that every CB650R, Hornet 750, Hornet 1000, CB500, all of them have exactly the same bar, foot peg and seat position.
I did wonder when you look at the Hornet, what riding position, it must be the closest to another Honda. There must be another Honda in history to which that ergonomic triangle is closest. And I wonder which Honda that is.
The CB1000R and the CB1000R before it.
No.
And the Hornet 900 before it.
You think?
Yeah.
Do you think?
Yeah.
Ooh.
You tell me different.
No, I mean, do you know that? Or?
No, I don't.
I don't know. I think it'd be different to the CB1000R, the 2018 one, because that was a strange old riding position on that thing. That had really flat bars, but they were quite low, and you sat sort of, it's quite sporty over. Anyway, I thought it was surprisingly naughty for a Honda, but much more sort of accommodating and practical and comfy than I thought it would be. What did you make of it?
Well, we only had the SP version, which differs from the regular Hornet by virtue of having check brain, an Olin shock, different front brake calipers, an up and down quick shifter, and a miraculous 5 horsepower more at the top end. I agree that it felt naughty in a way I wasn't expecting it to.
Yeah.
But I'd caveat that by saying, to me, it only felt naughty when you were riding it quickly at high revs.
Naughtily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you got on it and just plodded around town, there wouldn't be anything naughty feeling about it at all. It's really docile and really well-mannered and really every Honda ever. But it's when you get out on an open road and grab the handful of throttle and have it up at like 7,000 revs, 7,500 revs, it really flies. It really flies in a way that the CB1000R, both the trendy version and the old triangular Italian version, didn't. They kind of zoomed along and then kind of ran at a puff and stopped dead at like 120 horse, I think they made. This 30 extra horsepower does make a tangible difference. You can feel that added spice and spirit and spunk at the top end.
Yeah.
Without it compromising on it feeling kind of nice and usable and flexible and welcoming and all those lovely Honda words.
I'm in the middle of a geek test of the Hornet and the Hornet SP. And I was
Ah.
spent all night last night looking at dynographs and plotting dynographs.
Ooh.
And I think between 6,000 and 7,500 RPM, it puts on 40 horsepower in the space of 1,500 revs. Yeah, it's one of the most sort of vertical dynographs that I can remember seeing for a while.
Goodness.
It's like really, wow, that thing's that's going for it.
Picks up and it moves. Yeah.
It does, yeah. I was really intrigued, actually. One of the comments that your co-tester, Luke Brackenbury, said right at the start of the video was how it was kind of refreshing to ride an inline four because, you know, after a diet of so many different parallel twins and whatever, you know, to actually ride something like that. And one of the things that occurred to me was that there are other sporty, I think I've say this in the geek test, there are other sporty inline four sports bike inherited engines that still feel like they're from the mid 2000s and haven't got that kind of modern instant mid-range and they're there. But the Hornet has, and that's one of the things I really liked about it. It has that kind of Yamaha Tracer style instant spontaneity. Yeah, it's really good. So this deep dive I'm doing in the geek test, can I just bang on about it a bit?
Please.
Sorry to keep going on. So it's just really interesting. So it was based on a lot of this is going to be in the geek test. So, you know, watch
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert when you watch it. There's an awful lot more. So the engine is based on a 2017 Blade, but there are actually a lot of differences. So the Hornet has cast pistons and the Blade has forged pistons. And one of the things that we're talking about, the price of the bike, how can they make it so cheap? The difference in a cast piston and a forged piston, the Hornet piston is 80 quid. The Blade forged piston is 305 quid.
How much?
305. Just for one piston. So you're starting, that gives you a little insight.
So 1,200 quid of your Blade budget is just on the... Wow.
Yeah, I think the gudgeon pins are about 3 times more expensive in the Blade.
Wow.
The cams are hilarious. So if I understand this right, it's quite hard to work out from the sort of the technical stuff, the briefing that we get from Honda. But the Hornet has, I think, less lift and more overlap, or they've moved the overlap around. The phasing is different. Honda aren't specific. But apart from that, as far as I can tell, they're the same thing. They're not. One's not made out of gold and one's made out of paper. You know, they're kind of made from the same alloy, I guess. But the difference in price, a Hornet cam will cost you 440 quid. A Blade cam is 712 quid. And you think,
there's got to be something
why the
different.
difference?
There's got to be a finish on it, a heat treatment, a manufacturing process. There's got to be something.
Yeah,
that's
maybe the
different on
lobes are case hardened or something.
BLC'd or I don't know.
And there's a load of other little bits and bobs, like the Blade has twin valve springs. You know, they went through a phase of having the outer and then an inner spring, and the Hornet's only got a single spring. And the really I love this stuff. The exhaust valves in the Hornet are the same spec as in the Fireblade.
Okay.
Which are the same spec as were in the 2008 Fireblade.
I'm not surprised yet.
Same part number all the way through.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Awesome. Anyway, so yeah, there's an upcoming geek test on the Hornet, and
Fab.
it's something. Speaking of geek tests, bit of a tough watch, banging on about insane details sitting at a desk, but funny enough, the desk we use in the geek test is this very same desk we use for front end chatter.
Boy, does it bring them equal luck.
Anyway, since we last spec, there's also a geek test up there on the Bennett's YouTube website, we should say, the YouTube site. There's a geek test on the Triumph Scrambler 400X.
Ah, okay.
A bike which you know well.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I had a ride on it at the start of last year on the world launch. Half the day on it and half the day on its shorter, trendier cousin, I guess, the Speed 400. Certainly more agile cousin. How did you get on with the Scrambler?
Absolutely loved it. What a fantastic thing.
I am one of the people who has watched your geek test from start to finish.
Oh, good.
And I didn't expect you to like it at all because small capacity stuff is not really your cup of tea.
It's not.
Single cylinders are not really your cup of tea.
They are not.
And kind of knobbly, scramblery things are definitely not your cup of tea. So
No.
putting all three of them together, I figured this is going to be a tough watch.
Yeah, I thought
But
that
you
too.
were singing its praises.
Yeah, I really, really enjoyed it because it is a remarkable little bike. It looks so good for the price that it costs and for what it is. It's a great looking thing and it's a great riding thing too. Had some little quirks which were a little bit interesting. And I made a boo-boo in the thing as well. So if you spotted this, it really annoyed me. One of the readers, listeners, watchers, viewers spotted it and put it in the comments. So Triumph, rather misleadingly, I think, they don't actually name the forks in their press bump, but they do say they're big piston forks, which you immediately go, well, that's Showa. So I said they were Showa, and I should have checked because I'm lazy. But they're actually made by Endurance, an Indian company. Did you were aware of this?
It was a nugget in the back of my brain, but if you'd sat there and told me their show are big piston forks, I would have gone, are they? All right, fair enough. But yes, now you mention it, I seem to remember having perhaps made the same mistake.
It's a bit crafty-wafty, isn't it? That is,
I thought Big Piston was a like a brand name.
Well, I think,
rather than an accurate description.
I think is it an acronym or the other one?
Initialism?
Initialism. I think it's an initialism, isn't it? Yeah, what is it for Big Piston for? Anyway, that initialism, I think, is the registered trademark rather than the actual word. But either way, slightly naughty. Anyway, speaking of triumphs, moving swiftly on, one other thing I want to mention is Triumph Tiger Sport 800, because this is something else I've done recently. Since last we fecked, I did a job for their bike magazine as well. This will be out in the forthcoming issue, not the current issue, but it's forthcoming in the next few days. I think it's been printed, I think, so it's out soon. And it's interesting for me because it's a little snapshot which basically took over my life for a few weeks with the Tiger Sport 800. Bear with me, this is quite a long thing, so I'm going to be talking for a bit now.
I'll settle in.
Do you want to settle in and get a cup of coffee? So the editor, Mike Armitage, rang up and said, look, it's 120 years since the very first fully Triumph, which is already contentious because if you remember, Triumph celebrated their 120th birthday, a few years ago, and they allegedly found and restored one of the very first bikes. Now, depending on who you ask, that bike, the first Triumph, has slightly suspect provenance. It's a bit Trigger's broom, perhaps. And the very first Triumphs were actually bicycles with Belgian-made Minerva engines, so some people don't really consider them to be the first Triumphs. That would be the 1905 bike, which had a proper Triumph-built engine. So in 1905, remembering this is like barely a decade after the birth of motorcycles, there was a journalist for the Motorcycle magazine, a chap called Canon Basil H Davies, who went by the pen name of Ixion, bound to a fiery wheel in Greek mythology. And he took a 1905 Triumph and proved it by riding 1,279 miles in 6 days, basing himself at Oxford and riding to 6 towns 100 miles away every day.
Wow.
I know, it's a hell of a thing.
It sounds a bit like, not exactly the same as, but it sounds a bit like the Maud's Trophy.
Yeah.
Which was that thing I did a few years ago on Zeros, which was inspired by an ACU trophy that was handed out in 1923 to manufacturers who did these kind of long-distance endurance challenges to prove the reliability and durability of their road bikes. Is that kind of what he was doing to kind of prove that this
exactly what he was doing?
Newfangled.
In fact, I don't know the provenance of the Maud's Trophy, where that came from, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was in some way involved with it, because he was certainly involved with the founding of the ACU.
Oh, wow.
He was one of the first people to start organising time trials, which in those days you could hold on public roads. So he was doing the Land's End to John O'Groats runs. So he was sort of involved in the very first of those. I'm pretty sure he was involved in the origin of the TT racing at the Isle of Man.
Goodness.
So he was kind of integral to that, or he was at least involved in that movement. He was on first name terms with all the manufacturers at the time, and there were many in Britain.
I was going to say all of them, from all around the world.
There were lots
of them. Or indeed, he just leaned out of a window and shouted at them all.
Exactly.
So what was this guy's name again? Ixion?
Ixion was his pen name.
Okay.
Greek mythology was a Greek god.
Okay. If he had an Instagram handle, it would have been Ixion.
Yeah.
But what was his real name?
Basil H Davies.
What
Canon.
fabulous.
He was actually a priest, a man of the cloth.
And set me again, we're in 1905.
05. So literally 10 years or so after the birth of the motorcycle. This is before roads were even tarmacked.
Yeah.
We're
tarmac, pre sort of T. Lawrence and stuff.
Yeah, tarmac was invented in 1902. So they were, they hadn't even, there was a few, it's mostly cobbles and...
It'll never catch on. I really like dirt and gravel and riding around on that.
Well, the funny thing is, motorbikes were hated even then.
Of course they
by
were.
the public, because they kicked up loads of dust on these roads and aggravated them. I think there was a case where a woman actually, I think she sued because she had an irritated throat and it was killing the plants in her front garden. All her flowers were covered in dust.
Because of motorbikes.
So we've never been the most popular. Anyway, Mike at Bike wanted to recreate that ride 120 years later on a Triumph Tiger Sport 800. And his sort of rationale for it was that it's like that bike is the culmination of everything Hinckley's been doing for the last 30 years. It's kind of the bullseye Triumph, if you like, which I sort of, I kind of get. Clearly, 6 days was a bit of an ask. I couldn't spend that amount of time.
not to do 1,200 miles,
Not to do
but
1,200 miles.
pay a journalist's expenses.
So I reckon, exactly. So I reckon I could do 1,279 plus a photo shoot in 3 days.
Okay.
So I set off, and you can read about the trip in Bike Magazine. So I'm not going to sort of divulge what happened. But like Ixion, I visited 16 counties, which was quite... I mean, I really did have the sensation of riding in his wheel tracks as well, because I tried to... Although I was doing more of a radial route, I was copying a lot of the roads that he went on, and I sort of read his original feature, looked at some maps, some archive maps, and I spent ages working out which bypasses didn't exist and which way I could go. Now, clearly, if I'd stuck to his route entirely, like going through, say, the village of Colsterworth rather than going on the A1, if I did that for the whole route, it would have taken forever, because you just can't do that. So I had to do a bit of motorway and a bit of kind of going quite fast just to get the mileage up. But there's some fantastic stuff, like he was talking about, he went to... not Boothby Graffham. What was it called? It was Great Gonaby, I think. It's just north of Grantham. It's a little village, and he was talking about how he did the Great Gonaby to Stamford, 21 hills in 21 miles. And so I was thinking, well, I know that road, that area pretty well, that route. So Grantham to Stamford. What could be 21 miles? And he obviously must have gone down the old Great North Road, the Great North Road, the A1. And when you actually ride, if you think of the view from, the Colsterworth Bridge that goes over the top of...
Yes.
When you stand on that and look down at the A1 south to Stamford, you can see the hills. It goes up and it goes down. It ripples up and down.
Wow.
And if you count them, there are 21 of them. And it's important to him because although to us it's barely an undulation, to him... He had to pedal to get up some of these hills.
Wow.
So back in those days, in fact, I think right up to the naming of roads in about the 50s or whatever, you used to be able to buy guidebooks that didn't have maps on them. They had gradient maps. So they were literally cross-sections of the country. And the reason you had them, which I never really realised before, was because a lot of vehicles couldn't get up steep hills.
Yeah.
In fact, I think Ixion was one of the first people to ride a powered motorcycle up Porlock Hill, I believe. I could be wrong with that.
And because the roads wouldn't have been, you didn't just go and kind of decimate the countryside and create this lovely flat base and then stick a motorway on it. You kind of drizzled a bit of a dirt path over whatever ground was there to begin with. So you kind of couldn't use the brute force of, mechanical diggers and stuff to create your roads. So you had these, I guess, little dirt paths, and the what nature was there first was quite a challenge, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, what he did was phenomenal. I mean, after I'd done it in 3 days. It was hard work for me to do, but for what he must have gone through was extraordinary. Anyway, read about that in Bike Magazine. Stop talking about it now. But I do want to talk a little thing. I just want to read out some of Ixion's writing. This is from his Reminiscences, which is some books that he wrote later on in his career. Because he actually wrote for the motorcycle until he died in 1961, aged 81.
Oh, wow.
Bearing in mind, he did this first ride, this 1905 ride, when I think he was in his early 20s, which is, again...
It's when we all decide to do our stupid rides, isn't it?
So I just want to read a couple of these things, and if they're really boring, I'll edit them out of the podcast. So this is called The Nomadic Spirit. And this is Ixion writing back in the 1900s. If the historians are right, our forefathers were once nomadic. The inherited instinct dies hard. Man is still compelled to travel, and if his compulsory journeys are limited in range and character, he will yearn to extend them. The discomforts of other methods of travel and the genuine wanderlust combine to endow the motorcycle with a fresh appeal. For example, Jones lives in a villa at Willesden and must go to the city daily. Bus, tram, tube and train will conduct him thither punctually, cheaply and safely. Not so did his forefathers travel when winter or famine urged them towards pastures new. Furtively they crept through the forests, warily watching for the saber-toothed tiger. The deeps of Jones' nature yearned to recreate lost traditions, and so far as civilization permits, the motorcycle meets his need. The juggernauts of the road electric tram, the gay taxi cab, the rumbling motor lorry and the curt point policeman play much the same role in his life which the mammoth and the ape assumed towards his forgotten ancestors. In both cases, safety depends on personal effort. Perhaps the greasy tram line and the rain trickling under his collar and the numbed fingers on the steel levers tickle his manhood, just as his remote grandfather was not wholly oppressed by the precarious perch in the treetops and the bite of winter wind on his bare and hairy chest.
Do the bit about tickling his manhood again.
I just thought that was great.
Whoa, he's a big picture thinker then, wasn't he?
He was good. This is about motorcycling and health, funny enough, something you've been writing about. The motorcycle never fails to blow the cobwebs out of a stuffy brain. An hour in the saddle and the week's work simply ceases to exist whilst the entire body is oxygenated more entirely than a week at Brighton could do it. As a healthy distraction for busy men past their first youth, the motorcycle has no equal. How true is that today?
Yeah.
A healthy distraction for busy men past their first youth. I mean, that is...
Past their first youth.
That is us.
So that was the original born-again biker?
Yeah.
How could you be born again if you were in only 10 years after it had been... Yeah,
There is that, yeah. On the more quotes. Okay. Sorry, I'll carry on for a bit. On the road, our intrinsic slavery is forgotten. We may go where we will, and, except in Surrey, we may go as fast as we please. Okay, all right, that's changed. The willing machine between our knees is our slave, and we are its king. Nobody, except a policeman, can command our obedience. And even then, police authority does not extend beyond the next corner, unless fate should have placed a second Bobby there. During these brief hours in the saddle, we be free men, and we like the taste of it.
Whoa.
It just resonates.
Doesn't it?
Doesn't it echo? Doesn't it echo? One last one, please, if you could permit me. Sorry about this. It's great stuff. Travel revives the drooping soul. Finally, let a contrast be drawn between the places where men live and the places where no man lives. An unkind fate bids most of us dwell in Bayswater, Balham, Birmingham, or some such place. It has no beauty, and we all love beauty. For most of our lives, we are pegged down to places which may once have been fair but are now disfigured by trams, gin palaces, hoardings, suburban villas, newspaper contents bills, and other unlovely objects. The smear of civilization has not yet blotted out Dartmoor or Wensleydale or Lochmaree. The motor bicycle offers us an unlimited range of travel with absolute immunity from boredom. We need do nothing but look, and an ever-changing vista is presented to our gaze until stern duty calls us back to civilization. I hate to be utilitarian, but it is true that the motorcycle is no longer of necessity an open door into fairyland. Sordid people construct it, buy it and use it for their own disgusting purposes, such as saving time or money or extending the scope of their contemptible chafferings. It has the great misfortune to be the cheapest form of fast locomotion extant, and as such it is being increasingly adopted by people who are grossly unworthy of it. Already we bear identification numbers like postmen or convicts and other necessary evils. Already we are taxed like bills of exchange, dog licenses and other sordid byproducts of a corrupt civilization. Before long, we shall probably be marshalled along special rubber roads at set speeds, and when that ill day comes, I shall emigrate to a coral atoll in the South Seas with a high-powered seaplane.
Well, halfway through that, when you were raging against people, how dare they buy them because they're cheap to run, I was thinking, I wonder what he'd make of an NC 750. Yes. And then by the time he'd finished and he was raging about the injustices of having to pay tax, I was thinking, I wonder who he'd vote for.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. But that idea of liberation, I mean, some of that stuff is...
Oh, yeah. It's amazing how universal it is.
Isn't it? Still, 120 years.
I mean, the world's an utterly different place. Completely reinvented and transformed in the idea of travelling from point to point. Like he kind of just tosses off Balham 1 minute and then Loch whatever the next.
Lochmaree.
Like, how far away are they still today? And then how exponentially further apart were they in the 1905s?
Proper adventures, proper travels.
Motor bicycle.
On his
Literally
motor bicycle.
getting on a bicycle.
I did think about that when I was riding down through Reading and then Basingstoke, and I was riding past these sort of glass towers and these concrete pillars and flyovers and modern traffic. And I remember thinking he would be... This would be so alien to him, so alien. But then I wondered, I thought, what would you rather have if you had a choice? It's a little thought experiment. Would you rather have his motorcycling technology, his unreliability, his having to plan, no sat-nav, the kind of his state of his roads with no suspension and his tyres and his challenges, his riding kit, in those kind of conditions, but have his bucolic freedom and have that sense of wonder and adventure? Or would you rather have all the modern conveniences of today's motorcycle with its fantastic suspension and its heated grips and its heated seats, but the challenges of our riding environment?
There's no comparison. I want today's. Oh, there isn't
Really?
Yeah, 10 times out of 10. You give me that same choice, I'm choosing today's 10 times out of 10. Because today you've got versatility, you've got choice. You could still go and buy a monkey bike and put a tissue paper jacket on and go and bobble around some countryside roads. If you want to,
You could
all that
deconstruct.
stuff, the ABS and the traction control and the sat nav and the Bluetooth and the emergency system and the laminated Gore-Tex, they're all choices you make.
Yeah.
Nobody's compelling you to have all of that stuff. Maybe to some extent the ABS is on new bikes, but just don't buy a new bike then. Go and buy an SV650 or a Bonneville T120 or a Hidaka Road Toad or whatever. And
But the trade-off is you can only have that in today's modern riding environment. If you want that bucolic wilderness, that freedom, that thing where the only thing you're going to overtake on the road are chickens, and nothing's going to overtake you, then the trade-off is you have to have an antiquated machine, an antiquated kit. Which would you rather
but you've
have?
got that choice of history now, whereas there wasn't a history to choose from in 1905.
True, but you can't find that riding environment now. That riding environment has gone.
You can a bit. You can still get out in the countryside, but it doesn't last very long.
You can deconstruct the bike and go back to that kind of basic. In fact, it did.
Get out in the wilderness in Scotland or in Wales, and you can still get some of it.
Which we will, readers, very soon. I was speaking to a guy called Nick, actually, as part of this. He's a Belgian, not Dutch, which I made the mistake of going, are you in Holland? No, I'm in Belgium. Right, okay. Who actually did the one leg of Ixion's journey 2 or 3 years ago, maybe a bit more, I can't remember, on the last remaining 1905 Triumph.
Holy moly.
There are two of them. There's one in the National Motorcycle Museum, which is a non-runner and has been heavily restored. But Nick has got an original bike. And the story of how he acquired it is also in Bike Magazine, because I stuck that in a sidebar. It's fantastic. But he actually did one of the rides as well. He went down to the New Forest on this thing.
Oh, lovely.
Which is really, really good. So he did do the bucolic thing, and he did do it on the original bike. Yes, fair enough. Anyway, Ixion, what a human.
Never heard of him before, but what a dude.
Yeah, I wonder if in 120 years anyone's going to recreate the ride again.
I thought you were going to say, I wonder if in 120 years anyone's going to be following one of your old road tests and going, I'm following in the road tracks of Simon Hardgleaves.
I took that as read. Of course they will. Anyway, from 120-year-old British bikes built by a pair of Germans, should we give a brief mention to a new bike replica of an old bike built by some more Germans?
I'm so confused, but yes, we should.
I speak of none other than the new/old BMW R12 G/S. What's one of them, Mufka?
Yeah, or to be clear, the BMW R12 G/S, not to confuse it with the R1200 GS, which had no slash and no spaces. Now, BMW say this is it's a new bike they've announced, kind of out of nowhere it seems, but it's a, quote, classic enduro inspired by the legendary R80 G/S. And the G/S being very deliberately repeated, which, as the intro to every BMW book and buyer's guide ever written knows, stands for Gottfried Swaltenberg, named after Hans Gottfried, the first man to ever ride a motorcycle both on and off-road at the same time, and Swaltenberg, a small smoked sausage, which was the only available lunch option in the canteen when BMW opened its original motorcycle production line back in 1923.
By God, that's a brilliant fact. And there I was thinking it stood for something Strasser. But there we go.
Galanderstrasse.
Yeah.
Total fake news.
Brilliant.
The R12 G/S, in short, is an off-road scrambler-style version of what used to be known as part of their R9T platform. So you've got an air-cooled 1170cc boxer engine, which I think we can trace back to the HP2 Sport, with a claimed 80 kilowatts or 107 horsepowers, and a peak torque of 115 Nms or 85 Lubfoots. First thing I spotted is that peak torque is at 6,500 revs and peak power is at 7,000 revs.
Oh, yeah.
There's not many engines where the two things happen at pretty much the same time.
No.
It's unusual. There's a traditional tubular steel frame from the R12 with a tweaked steering head, not the fabricated gimmick of the latest 1300s. There's long travel, fully adjustable suspension at both ends, beefy 45mm forks. No telelever, thank you very much. With 210mm travel at the front and 200 at the rear. Standard wheel sizes are 21 at the front and 17 at the rear, but there is an optional enduro package which bumps your rear up to 18 for them that want to do more serious Galanderstrassing. Wheels appear to be cross-spoke, which I think means they probably should be tubeless.
They will be, yeah.
But we'll see. What else? For a sense of scale, the seat height is a whopping 860 mil. The fuel tank is 15.5 litres, and all-in curb weight is 229 kilos. More important than that, price starts at £14,085 for the bare bones lowest model spec in black. Lowest spec model even in black. The R80 homage red, white and blue colours, which surely everybody wants. I can't imagine buying one in black, but that's another £300 bitter. The Enduro package of different rear wheel, different pegs, different bar risers, handguards, and whatever is another £750. The comfort pack, heated grips, cruise control, hill hold is £1,000. And then there's a heap more stuff like tyre pressure monitors, lightweight battery, different seats and wheels. You can even swap the quaint circular analogue dash for a mini TFT if you want to in the configurator. I've never seen optional clocks before.
Clocks
That's
now.
a new one to me.
Jeez.
I took 2 minutes on that online configurator and had already jumped the price from 14 to 19,500 pretty swiftly. So the price depends on what you want, but that's the bit that kind of made me splutter over my Svoltenberg earlier. Triumph's Scrambler 1200, which I guess is its closest competitor spiritually and specally, is £11,895 for the lower X model, and £13,295 for the XE. Similar kind of power, a little bit. Triumph's a little bit down on power and torque, but also 15-litre tank and similar weight, kind of much of a muchness. And they're both doing that weird fusion of nostalgia and homage with no, we really can go off-road. And there's not too many other bikes that sort of tread in that line, are there?
No. I suppose the V85 is the only other one I can think of, but that's even less power, so I'm not sure if that's playing the same game. Yeah, no, it sounds right. You lost me at 15-litre tank.
Yeah, okay.
Was it 15.7 or 15?
15 and a bit, yeah.
Yeah. That's the bit where I kind of went, oh, okay.
Right.
A little bit too kind of, I can imagine the kind of guy that will want to buy this, and lady, will be sort of those ones that appreciate a more generous tank than that, maybe.
I get the feeling these are not really Tourers in the sense of a GS. Like, they look quite stark. They don't look like there's a lot of wind protection. They're kind of more leisure bikes, I think.
Yeah, did the configurator have a panniers option?
Oh, yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Oh, and a high screen
and a high
screen as well, sir.
Yeah, you wait. I mean, the GS was never a touring bike until people decided they wanted to go touring on it.
Yeah, quite. Yeah, I got to ride an R80 GS.
Did you?
Out in Germany 2 years ago. From the BMW Museum. And yeah, I mean, it's so totally different from what we think of as a GS today.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think it's a handsome looking thing. I think it's the kind of bike you buy in those red, white and blue colours with the red seat and the white paintwork with the kind of 2 shades of blue on the tank. I think it looks great.
Do you?
I just think it's still going to be quite a niche interest. I don't see a lot of those Scrambler 1200s about on the road. So I don't think you're going to see a lot of R12 G/S's.
I think
there'll be a few.
There'll be a few. I don't think you'll see too many in the special colours. What was it? The sand?
The option, whatever.
Yeah. Oh my God, that looks awful.
Yeah,
That's
not so pretty.
Yeah, not so pretty BMW. Is it as pretty looking as the R9T GS?
Oh, what was the R9T GS? Give me a quick mental brain check. That was a couple of years ago?
Yeah, it was the oppo to the R9T Racer. So it was kind of the GS version of the R9T Racer. So it was a much more, I mean, you could say it was more authentically styled towards the original R80 and R100 GS.
Was it a bit more sort of scramblery?
It was more scramblery. It didn't have the suspension travel. It had a lot more weight and low seat height, and it was very much more a scrambler. Very limited off-road, no off-road ability at all. But to me still is a gorgeous looking thing.
Sure,
and more in keeping with the aesthetic of the original R80 GS than perhaps the
12.
R1290 GS. Is that what it's fully called? Is it the R12?
No, there's no 90 anymore.
No 90
it's an
anymore.
R space 12 space G/S.
Good, I'm glad, because that was slightly confusing. Yeah.
My other big concern about it is that it's just delaying BMW from introducing the bikes we actually want them to build. It's not the new boxes that we're hoping for, is it?
Oh, I see. No, it's not.
Because all of this messing around with your retro air-cooled stuff is lovely. But I think what we all know, what we all want, what we're all longing for is the day that press release pings in your inbox that says BMW announces the new R1300 RS.
I don't think that day's too far away.
No,
I should think
not.
it will be soon. And
And R.
I hope they don't forget the R. Yes, I'm looking forward to that. That will be an astonishing bike. I hope in the sports tourer equation, I hope they fold it a little bit more towards the touring than the sports.
Do you?
Because I always found that was my limitation with the RS.
Okay.
I would love an RS. I'd love the R1200 RS. It's brilliant, but I would get a Wunderlich flat bar conversion for it from Nippy Normans for £275. Requires no extension to the cables. Takes 5 minutes to fit, well, a bit longer, but because the R1200R riding position and dynamic, the leverage you get over the steering is much, much, much improved over the RS, I think. So I hope they go for a little bit down, because they did offer an option, I think, as a flat bar, one of their options for the RS on the configurator. So maybe they'll make that mandatory for the 1300. I don't know.
Maybe.
But yeah, we look out for that. That will be interesting. Wow, we've talked at length, haven't we? Is it time? Oh, there's one more thing I want to say, actually. This is a bit of a downer. The Ponderosa Cafe.
If you do the downer, I'll do the upper.
Okay, you do the upper, I'll do the downer. Gotcha. Okay. Ponderosa Cafe at the top of the Horseshoe Pass in Wales. Very popular biker cafe. Has closed.
Oh.
It was something I think was probably at least partially caused by the 40-mile-an-hour speed limit that was introduced on the road in 2022.
Okay.
Which dissuaded, I would imagine, a lot of their traditional custom from visiting them, because you sort of, well, why go there because you can't do what you want to do. Anyway, yeah, they're closed down. It's a shame when a biking institution like that closes. I always think that's a bit sad. We've lost one. So somebody write to us.
Think about it, like Cat and Fiddle pub closed, and the one that burnt down up in the
the Hartside Pass in the Pennines. Yeah,
famous cafes on famous biker roads. There's not that many left.
I think that there are a few that spring up. There's and there are some that are still there. I mean, I don't know if people still go to. Was it Rikers in Box Hill? Or
crikey!
There's the 1066 or the Route. What's it called? The Route 1066 or something like that. I went down there the other day, so I should know the name. That's down in Sussex. There's plenty of them are out there still.
We need a campaign, Si.
Do we?
Save our biker calves before they all turn into Starbucks.
Yes, I know. It's not quite the same, is it? Good.
Well, we've bought the land and we've repurposed it into yet another identikit tax-dodging turquoise shit palace.
I do like my Starbucks, though.
You're the problem. You're not the solution.
Sorry.
Can we just do some good news then? Honda Europe has announced a new service-activated warranty across more than a dozen EU countries plus the UK, covering all road-going motorcycles for up to 6 years.
What?
Yeah, 6-year warranty. Asterisk terms and conditions apply.
What terms and conditions?
Well, it's not a 6-year warranty from day one, as some of the headlines seem to be sort of ingesting or suggesting or supplying or implying. This is the continuing initial 2-year warranty that then gets extended by a year every time you have a scheduled service at an authorised Honda dealer for up to 6 years.
Okay, well...
Now, it stays with the bike, so if the first owner sells it, the extended warranty will pass on
that's good
to the next owner, but only if you and all previous owners have also all had all the right services, all the right times, with all the right dealers.
Well, that's not beyond the bounds of expected, really, is it? If you're going to honour a warranty, then that's standard for a 2-year warranty, isn't it? If you have to have got the bike serviced. And
I think there's some legal discussion about that. I know in the car world there was a case that I can't name, but it forced car manufacturers to admit that you could get your car serviced at an independent dealer so long as it was done to the same standard and with the correct parts.
Okay.
And you wouldn't invoid your warranty. I think there was some discussion about whether that did apply to bikes due to some hideously convoluted terminology thing. But... yes, I guess it's good news. Honda aren't taking anything away from anyone. If you were quite happy with how their setup was 6 weeks ago, then you can still have your 2-year warranty and service it yourself, and that's the end of that. I guess it's easy to be cynical and say this is nothing more than a ploy to force customers to spend more money on servicing with dealers and remove the choice of servicing yourself or via independent mechanics. But to be honest, I'm kind of not that offended by it.
No.
I think dealers have had a bit of a rough time in the past year anyway. I think it's well-established fact they don't make an awful lot of money on selling bikes. They do instead on the servicing side of things. And I think if it kind of encourages a better relationship, and I mean that in both senses, in both directions, both better customer service from the dealers to the riders and kind of riders to have a slightly closer relationship with their franchise dealers, then I don't think it's a bad thing. It also could have the potential benefit of a sort of higher quality, more cared for used bike market down the line.
Yeah.
If we start seeing those dealer services as an investment in the bike's future value, because I certainly would be looking at things like whether that warranty was still going. If I'm looking at a used bike 5 years down the line.
Yeah, it would definitely make a difference to where you put your money. Oh, having said that, my sympathy for dealers has there is a limit. I was talking to someone the other day who was taking care of a Suzuki sports bike that was about 8 years old and was something like that, and was he'd inquired about the possibility of getting a full valve clearance check. And the bill came back. I think it was well over £1,000. It was about £150 an hour. It worked out. And at that point, I went, bloody hell, that's a bit steep. But if your dealers, they've got to pass the cost on to somebody.
Pay someone somewhere, and I don't know. But potentially. I mean, maybe some dealers have different rates than other dealers.
Yes.
And maybe it encourages competition among dealers. Like if you know that you have to take your bike back to a Honda dealer and you've got 3 within spitting distance, maybe you'd choose the good one. Yes. Maybe they get all the work. The only other thing to mention about this is that it isn't revolutionary or industry leading, because exactly 2 years ago to the day, in fact, April 2023, Suzuki launched their service activated warranty scheme, which is still in place today. It's a similar thing, but with Suzuki's plan, see if you can spot the difference. You get an initial 3-year warranty, which is then extended year by year with each approved service up to 7 years. Or up to 70,000 miles. And when you look at the wording of the original Suzuki press release, it says if you buy a used bike that the original warranty has expired on and there's a gap in the service history, then providing the new owner has their motorcycle serviced at a dealership and goes through a health check in the first instance, it will benefit from a fresh 1-year warranty.
What?
So on paper, just quickly looking through it, it does seem like even Honda's brilliant new news is still not quite as good as Suzuki's existing brilliant old news.
Funny you mentioned Suzuki. Yeah. Wow. Okay. That's incredible as well then.
I'll tell you what, it really would make a difference to me. I've seen there are little bits and stuff.
I think it's a bit late for your SV650, mate, to be fair.
Can I go and get a health check on this 24-year-old, 22-year-old bike? Yeah, maybe not. But it would absolutely sway my decision if I was looking at buying a new bike. It really would. And you can see, I think Kawasaki have kind of tried to open up their warranties up to 4 years. I think KTM are kind of up to 4 years, Takata up to 4 years. I like the fact that these manufacturers, that it's going this way. It should be getting longer and longer. You should have more confidence in your product. And we as buyers should be getting better quality bikes that don't go wrong.
Yeah. I agree. I concur.
I'll take that as good news.
That's good news. Any other good news?
That'll do for me.
Okay, good. We're good. We're news.
Can we not end on some good news?
Yes, we can. We have.
Some good news, not enough?
Right. We have reached the halfway mark.
Okay.
Shall we dive into the sack of feck?
Please. Excellent. Where do you want to begin?
Shall we kick off with Carl Bates?
Please.
Carl Bates says, hi there. I came across your pod by accident and absolutely love it.
Oh.
Yours sincerely... No, he carries on. Having boxes of PBs from the early 90s in the shed, finding something with Simon in it again has stirred a myriad of wonderful... What's he going to go? Where's it going to go? Reminiscences. Anyway, I'm starting to dribble, says Carl. And so am I, Carl. Here are some photos of an R6 group test that I came across whilst playing on my local track, or as it's also known, the Great Ocean Road in Victoria, Australia.
Oh, wow.
Oh, Carl, mate. The journos had been testing at Phillip Island the day before, then flown to Torquay. Torquay?
Not that Torquay.
Not that Torquay. The bikes having been trucked around Port Phillip Bay. Patrick Gosling, he of Golden Goose fame, MotoGP photographers to the stars back in the day, was taking the shots. Some great wheelie sessions at Eastern View, not far from the house in Mad Max where Mad Max lived. How about that? I thought you might find them interesting. Cheers, Carl. P.S. I was on the ZZR 1100 D2 with my mates on the blue R1 and the green ZX9R, which is mine. Carl, you don't actually say when that actually was, do you? I'm just going back through your emails.
If it's an R6 launch in Australia, it's maybe the original R6.
Yeah, the very first ones. We're talking 99?
So the launch might have been in late 98. Were you there, Si? That was your kind of era?
I was not there. No, I didn't go on that one. Do I remember it? I think vaguely, yeah. But yeah, the shots that you sent, Carl, look very 1990s photo shoot. People doing wheelies on straight roads past photographers standing there with their A-frame stance, holding a 500mm lens or something.
Lovely.
And a car parked. Yeah, it does make me reminisce. It does look very familiar. And I'm glad to know that people were doing that on the other side of the world as well as just around here.
Australia, sports bikes, new bike launches, road and track, time of year. Used to be a thing, didn't it?
It did used to be a thing.
You used to do some.
Yeah, I've done a few. Yeah.
What was the best Australia sports bike, road and track launch thing that you did?
The best one.
If you could go back and relive one of them right now.
I would go back and relive. The TL1000R was good fun.
Oh, wow. Similar time then.
Yeah, that was Eastern Creek in 97.
7 for 8.
Yeah. So that was that. And then there was some awful cruiser or something ridden in the Blue Mountains the next day.
Was there?
So we all went tearing around Eastern Creek, which was quite good fun, although the bike wasn't brilliant, to be perfectly honest. There was a little bit kind of like, is that it? And then we all got massively fucking drunk, so drunk the night before a further test on the road.
Professional.
Misled, I must say, by one of the Suzuki bosses, whose name I can't remember, so I'm terribly sorry, but he took
Probably
us
for
out.
the best.
We got absolutely, it was in one of those rock karaoke bars. And the next morning, I remember being awoken by Suzuki's Nick Barnes, who passed away recently, R.I.P., banging on the hotel room door, going, "Fucking hell, Hardgleaves, the coach is leaving." and I was actually in the shower, covered in vomit.
Your own?
My own.
Okay.
And so I sort of had to turn the shower on, quickly shower while everyone was waiting in the coach, and rush downstairs. Still absolutely pissed as a fart.
Wow.
And sit in a coach in the sweating heat, driven into the Blue Mountains and then deposited on this, I think it was a VN of some sort or some big Suzuki cruiser. And I think most of the Brits were still clearly drunk, absolutely wrecked. And that's the only time I've ever put a leg over a motorbike and not been in complete control of it from that point of view anyway.
Me.
And we were all dry heaving into helmets and all sorts. It was horrific. But so that was quite a good one.
How fantastic! Well, about that time, I had my
Did you? Have you
very
ever been
exciting.
Over there?
No, not for work.
No.
I had a very exciting Saturday job in WH Smith's, putting out the motorcycle magazines actually.
Okay.
And I remember picking up a copy of Superbike at the time.
Yeah.
And they were running a spot where the rest of the bike ended up competition from the TL1000R launch.
Yeah.
There was it a German or a Swiss journalist
who'd
one made quite a spectacular mess of it? It was one of those where the bike's really high in the air and facing in all the wrong directions. And it was I think it was put an X on where you think this bike's going to land when it touches the ground again. So it sounded like they were pretty wild events.
That was fairly hard.
You don't see that nowadays.
You
don't see bikes 6 foot in the air facing the wrong direction. I mean, it seems like a lot of the people on the Triumph launch had a good go at it. But.
Yes, I think so. Yeah. You certainly don't get an awful lot of that. Well, you do get that drinking, but not the night before. No, actually, I'll stop there. I'm going to stop there.
What stays on tour?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Carl. Yes, we had a little bit of a trip down memory lane there. Thank you very much.
It's funny how they never come over to Britain for a launch, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why is that?
I wonder.
Graham Mazza says, I've got another international flavour. Growing up in Canada in the 90s and the 2000s, my primary source of information about motorcycles was via print magazines. The local newsstands here were dominated by the American titles Motorcyclist and Cycle World. 2 relatively lightweight titles, says Graham, with long histories. Alternatively, if one went to a proper bookshop, then buried behind titles about model trains and vintage cars, one could find a treasure trove of bike, ride, fast bikes, superbike, and even street fighters. When compared to the sanitized and industry cheerleader nature of the American titles, the irreverence, humor, and focus on the rider was a revelation to Graham. A typical issue of Cycle World was full of first ride gushing press releases and so-called comparison shootouts, where they would inevitably end up with some variation on all these bikes are amazing, but if we had to pick a winner, it would be the most expensive one. In sharp contrast, a typical issue of Bike was overflowing with riding tips, useful gear reviews, testing minutiae, touring guides, mostly to destinations that seemed impossibly exotic, like Cornwall, and all manner of other good stuff. What came across most as the difference between US and British titles was the level of respect for the average rider. Where the American magazines seemed to function primarily as a sales tool for advertisers, the British titles seemed relentlessly focused on helping riders be safer, smarter, and better informed, or at least teaching them to wheelie or fit a root supercharger to a GSX-R 1100, depending on the title. So Graham's question is, were you pair aware of this pronounced difference in culture? Without disparaging the fine folks who worked on the west side of the Atlantic, why do you think the difference was so pronounced? Did you guys come across the American journos at various launch events and roll your jaundiced eyes at their earnest positivity? I don't think I had that many interactions with Americanists Americanist journalists.
Sort of back in the 90s on PB, all the magazines used to get all the international magazines. So everybody has a subscription to everything. So we saw the lot. Car and Bike India, all the US titles, Motor Journal, Motor Review, the French ones, the whole lot. And I remember thinking we did have the feeling that the US mags were heavily industry focused. They were fairly staid and worthy. They took themselves very seriously in a slightly aloof kind of way. But it was always fairly hectic. If there was ever the US and the UK on a racetrack launch, then it would. I remember one in particular. It was a ZX6R, one of the iterants of that bike, and it was at Kawasaki's test track in Japan. And it turned into it actually was an official race. Like the sessions were, here's the US group, here's the UK group, here's the US group, they were lap timers, people were out there with stopwatches. It was kind of an unofficially sanctioned. I remember we were there with Guy Martin. Guy Martin was one of the road testers for PB, I think, at the time.
Oh, wow.
And so he helped us improve our pace a little bit. I think Jonathan Pearson was there as well, who's not a slow rider.
Yeah.
But I think he crashed, actually. I can't remember. I think Guy Martin might have had him off. I can't remember. There was a little bit of controversy around that. Yeah, there was something going on there. I remember Jonathan complaining a bit about something. But the Americans were very good at pulling wheelies down the straightaway. There was a lot of that going on. But we did roll our eyes at them quite a lot, mostly because it was that British thing where you're sitting in a hotel bar and then this bunch of guys rush in off the airplane and their accents really stand out and they're loud and they're brash. It's very stereotypical. And we used to go, oh, fucking hell, look out, here comes Hollywood. Because all you can hear was all this kind of stuff. And, hey, Jake, hey, and you're like, oh, bloody hell, here they come. But there was never any needle. And then it was drinks all round. And they probably thought, oh, look at the limeys all at the bar, the fucking alkies. That's probably the way it goes. Too cool for their own good, Americans. That was their trouble, I think. So there we go. Anyway, does that help at all, Graham?
Thank you very much.
Thank you for that.
Graham continues with a little bit more.
More.
Which goes, it's so long, I can't kind of read through it all, but it runs through a little bit of his bike history, which is started with a 1988 Honda Hornets GT, a Bros 650 in English, followed by a 2007 Kawasaki ZX14, ZZR, I think you'll find, not ZZR. And then a ZX10, and then we get to today and a 2018 Aprilia Tuono 1100, which Graham says he dearly loves, but where's he moved to? Hamilton, near Toronto, where access to great roads is extremely limited. The few nearby roads have corners that are always busy and artificially low speed limits, draconian speeding laws, and insanely high insurance premiums. So Graham needs to make a change. He wanted something that would have a good amount of torque, would be built to be ridden happily at slow speeds, was comfortable, had some sex appeal, could still tip over a bit if the opportunity arose without dragging hard parts, and had either decent suspension or could have decent suspension fitted. That's surely every bike ever, isn't it? But okay.
Yeah.
So we get to primary use would be sunny weekend rides on paved back roads, distance not that important, but a tank range of 125 miles, of less than 125 miles would be a problem. He says, in other words, I wanted a cruiser that could handle and didn't look like a cruiser. Be very
Right.
curious to hear what you would suggest. Now, this is one of those, I have already bought a bike. Can you guess what I've bought?
Unfortunately, I was so invested in reading what Graham was saying that I just carried on reading. So I can't play the game and pretend that I didn't see what he had.
Well, if you were recommending a cruiser that, what was it? A cruiser that doesn't handle like a cruiser and doesn't look like a cruiser. I mean, I thought Yamaha MT-01 because it has a cruiser heart, but it has a sports bike-ish chassis and suspension, and it could lean over a bit. And we talked about it quite in depth a few episodes ago. Mm-hmm. So I thought maybe that had kind of inspired Graham to pick up a keyboard.
Yeah, that was one of mine.
But that was about it. I ran out after that. I mean, there's things like street rods and the XR 1200L, whatever it's called, XL 1200L. Can't remember now.
Yeah, I know the one you mean. Well, see, Graham's talking about why aren't there more sports cruisers, which is how he sort of defines that bike. And I sort of thought, what is a sports cruiser? It sounds to me like a Rocket or a Diavel.
Yeah.
But then aren't they power cruisers? And that's
maybe.
a slightly different thing.
Yeah, okay.
And then I thought, well, it's usually why aren't they popular? It's because they're a bit weird. and the thing is, they're not exactly sporty, really. What these are is retro roadsters.
Yeah, okay.
And a cruiser for me has a feet forward riding position and a really low seat and a specific image. And so if you say, okay, it hasn't got feet forward and it hasn't got quite that kind of cruiser vibe, it hasn't got rakes out front forks, but it hasn't got a sporty engine, then you're getting into sort of a retro roadster thing. Like you say, the MT-01, and then I'm thinking BMW R9Ts maybe, or the R12 9Ts, or maybe even stuff like Kawasaki Z900 RS. In fact, there are plenty of them, because isn't there supposed to be soon a CB1000F, sort of like a Hornet in a Freddie Spencer dress?
Is there?
Coming from Honda. Yeah, I've seen some goop shots. It was a concept shown by Honda somewhere. I can't remember which show it was.
So the 2017 Fireblade engine thing we were just talking about earlier.
Yep.
But dressed up a bit retro.
Bit retro. Round headlight, Freddie Spencer's silver and blue paint job, ducktail. It's like a bit more of a ducktail back end to it.
Yeah, I can see that. That would kind of fit in with Z900 RS and XSR 900 and Katana.
So that's the kind of thing.
Okay.
But like I say, I can't really play along the game because I do know what it actually brought. So put us out of our misery.
Graham put us out of our misery. He says, I ended up with, after carefully considering a Kawasaki ZRX, a Yamaha MT-01, thank you, and a BMW R9T, I eventually bought a clean 2017 Moto Guzzi Grigio 1200. He says, looks are obviously personal, but I think it's stunning. I think it's aged very well in an unmistakably Italian way. True. The motor is a lazy air-cooled lump, but it has a nice and surprisingly smooth kick at the top end. I mean, all things are relative. That keeps things fun. He finishes with, what are your thoughts on the Grigio and why so few sport cruisers exist? Well, we've kind of done the sports cruisers. What do you remember about the Grigio? No longer with us.
Yeah. Have you ridden one?
Yeah.
You've probably ridden it more than I have. I think I slung a leg over it for a photo shoot and then got off it again. So I can scarcely remember it.
And never remember longing to repeat the experience.
Not specifically, no. What are your memories of it?
I rode one in late 2006 on a bike for a bike group test with a Kawasaki ZRX 1200R, funnily enough, a Triumph Bonneville and a Ducati Sport Classic GT1000.
This sounds like one of those November group tests.
I think this was late summer. It was, we called it Bend Swingers. And we took them to three of the bendiest roads in the country, one up in the Yorkshire Dales, one the Cat and Fiddle, and one down in South Wales. And it was at the time when I still had 2 kneecaps, and I did the entire test in a pair of Tesco jeans.
Nice.
Yeah, so it was that kind of flapping around in the breeze.
Tesco turn-ups, lovely. Yeah. Good stuff.
My ranking at the end of the test went Ducati first, Kawasaki second, Guzzi third, Triumph last. I described the Guzzi apparently as hellishly uncomfortable, even for a 24-year-old, with the riding position being like, quote, squatting to go to the loo while holding on to some railings. I'm still not entirely sure what that means.
That's when you go to the loo and there is no loo. There's nothing to actually sit
just
on.
Hanging off the railings. My legs were too cramped, my arms were spread too wide. It was a handsome thing. It seemed nicely put together. I remember the motor felt very heavy, that kind of weighty crank thing that kind of, it doesn't really want to spin up, and then once it's spinning, it doesn't really want to slow down either. A bit wheezy, very lumpy, lots of torque reaction, that kind of rocking to the right thing when you blip the throttle, and harsh suspension, and the side stand decked out in left-handers. Basically, I like looking at it a lot more than I like riding it. But we also acknowledge that it was the kind of bike that would find an audience that would absolutely adore it. Chippy, Bike's legendary photographer, was also on the test, absolutely was infatuated with the Grezzo, and it was his test winner by a country mile. So, Graham, you share something in common with the one and only Chippy Wood.
Oh, Graham, well, that's a high accolade indeed.
And not me, mercifully.
Look, if you like it, then that's great. My memories are, pretty much the same as yours. I can remember it being long. It didn't want to steer. And it was kind of like the thing, I mean, with most Guzzies back in the day, you kind of felt like it's, I'm not sure what the engine was designed to do, and it wasn't really at home in the Stelvio, and it wasn't really at home in the Grezzo. Not really sure
what it was for.
Yeah, what was it for? Anyway, good stuff. Excellent. Thank you very much. Right, moving on. Chan Fan says, "Hi again, gents. This is a typical what bike should I buy email. I'm from the US. I'm a track day instructor, and I currently own 4 bikes. Wow. And I want to cut this down to only 1 street bike. My 848 track bike Ducati 848 track bike isn't going anywhere. The Husqvarna FE501, which I looked at some kind of off-road thing, KTM 2024 890 SMT and a 2017 Aprilia RSV can all go."
Wow.
Says Chan. "I've owned everything from dirt bikes to super bikes, but now I'm looking to only have 1 bike for the street. I get all my speed needs out on the track, so not a super bike. I want something around 100 horsepower, around 400 pounds, which I think is about 180 kilos, and I want to be able to beat the piss out of it, and it still wants more." Nice. "It doesn't have to be dirt capable, but will probably be taken off-road, maybe even single track.
Oof.
Needs to be able to rip through twisty roads, ideally a small form factor. I have no budget in mind as I can sell all 3 bikes." Chan.
Wow.
Do you know what my first thought was? Keep the 890 SMT.
Yeah.
You need something slightly dual purpose, but good on the road. So I'm immediately thinking 19-inch front, or 17, 19. If you want it to be light, small and rorty, so there's no inline 4s, no V4s, not really any triples, so you're looking at V-twins and P-twins, not really singles because it's not 100 horsepower. 100 horsepower from a twin puts it in the 800 to 1,000 cc mark, so... I get an 890 SMT.
It's a really good shout.
I'd rather have a really clean, nice 2014. I think they were still making them KTM 990 SMT, which might be a bit too big and heavy, but bugger me, they were good. I really did like them. I know if I rode it again,
good,
who knows? And I can't get away from the 890 SMT. It sounds perfect. The only Ducati I can think of is a Desert X, but that's not lightweight. BMW, nah. Honda CB750 Hornet is kind of close on spec and it's a lot quicker than you think, but it's not an off-road bike. Kawasaki and Yamaha MT-09 would be perfect, but again, it's not an off-road bike. Tiger 800 Sport,
Monkey tennis.
Yeah,
I've got one. It's a bit niche, but it might fit your bill. It's a Husqvarna Svartpillen 801.
Oh,
103 horsepower, curb weight of 190 kilos, which is 420 pounds. So it's a tiny bit over, but not too much. Great engine. I'm really mushing together my words. Massive spoonerism. Great engine, great handling. It's got slightly knobbly-ish tyres, MT60RS Pirellis.
Yeah.
Which, there are worse things to ride down a dirt track. There is, coincidentally, a video review on Bennett's Bike Social channel from the launch last year. But it might do what you're looking for.
Yeah, that's
really
a good
fun to throw around. Really good handling, great engine, a really different kettle of fish to the 790 Duke that you think it is based on or shares an engine with, but feels totally different to ride in execution. So I'd quite like to,
Yeah, that's a good shout. Things. I think that is a good shout. I've completely forgotten that bike, overlooked it.
As so often it is.
So often the
introduce
case.
a bike at a hugely high price and then start selling off the 790 Dukes at absolute peanuts and then wonder why the Husqvarnas aren't selling.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay, next.
Kevin Abreu, I think it is, who says he's a very long-time listener, first-time writer. My question stems from the fact that I don't know if I should sell my bike and get something different or if I should keep my 2016 Triumph Daytona 675R and do some upgrades instead. Kevin says, I've been riding since 2016, took my CBT as soon as I was old enough to do so, and since then I've taken each licence as soon as I could, A2 at 19 and full A licence at 21. Good man, good on you. At 19, I had a Suzuki GSX 650F, which may or may not have stayed unrestricted. Stayed restricted, surely. And during that time, I saved up for my dream bike, Triumph's Daytona 675R with ABS. It's been an amazing bike and I've taken it from London to Portugal twice, doing 4 days in the Picos de Europa last year. I've not done a track day yet, but I have Brands Hatch booked. but I'm wondering if there's anything worth upgrading to. It just seems like the best all-round super sports bike. I could either give it a tune and have the suspension adjusted, or I could sell it and get something different. What do you think?
What do I think? I think, assuming you want to stay on the sports bike path, and why not? You're young, go for it. An upgrade to a 675R will be 765 RS, maybe, minus the full fairing, I guess.
What, the street triple?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
If that matters. And I suppose the next logical step would be from that, in terms of sporty bikes, might be a litre sports bike, because I can't think of anything that really bridges that gap.
I mean, nowadays, mercifully, 2025 sees the R9, Yamaha R9.
I thought about that. It's going to have to be really, really special to look at and to touch and feel to be more special than a 675R to look at and touch and feel. I'm sure it'll be quicker-ish. It's relative, isn't it? But yeah, as an ownership experience, so I don't know. I'd go for an early model S1000RR.
Of course you would.
I guess.
Power.
You know.
I think what's quite telling is that Kevin hasn't listed any problems, faults, or things that he wishes to kind of replace or overcome on his bike. He just is singing its praises. And I think if you have that relationship with your bike, then just crack on. Surely the money's better spent, like he describes, go and get a suspension set up or overhaul or an upgrade or something.
It does sound to me a little bit like he's kind of like right at the start of his biking career, and he's looking at all these different kind of bikes, and he wants to spread his wings and try a bit of this and try a bit of that. And you've already got the bike that you say of your dreams.
It's great, yeah.
And it's great. But you
spend the money to keep it going, in my book.
Yeah, upgrade the suspension. I'm not sure what you do tuning-wise. You get a pipe and a mapping, get it mapped.
What's the year, did you say? 2016. So we're at 9 years old now.
Yeah.
If that suspension hasn't yet been pulled apart, new oil, new seals and bearings and all that stuff, and that kind of stuff just doesn't kind of get done in most normal servicing. But if you could take it to an MCT or an Able suspension or whoever else and get them to just spend a bit of money and just make it lovely again. Just keep it lovely. Otherwise, the bikes that are sort of 10 years old very quickly become bikes that are 25-year-old rust buckets that sit in the corner under a sheet. So cherish it.
The other thing is, if you're in your 20s, the insurance, I shudder to think what you'd be asked for a litre sports bike, even an old S1000RR. So,
and don't touch the engine. Don't worry about engine power or tuning it or any of that nonsense.
You could flirt with the exhaust and mapping, nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. But yeah, I sort of envy you actually, Kevin, but I sort of don't envy you at the same time. It's kind of like...
I love the fact that he's got 675R and rides it to Picos and back and goes touring on it, because I couldn't do that.
Damn, that's the coolest thing. Yeah.
More power to you.
Good stuff.
Not more power, more suspension quality to you. That's what I mean.
Where should we go next? Do you want to go Dave Burrows next?
Sure.
Okay, Dave Burrows says, hello chaps, listening to Simon's chat in FEC 209 about the polishedness of the new Multistrada V2 reminded me of a test ride of a Multi V4S that I was persuaded to take by my friend Smithy a few years ago. Smithy was considering the Multi as a replacement for his BMW R12 RS. I'd ridden to the Ducati dealership in the middle of rural Switzerland somewhere.
They are getting harder to find these days, aren't they?
On my BMW R9T, a bike I still have and love. I found the Multistrada to be so good as to be utterly boring. I think my feedback was, it's like riding a laptop. You both hit on something when you say that the flaws of a bike often give it character. The R9T I rode there on is essentially a parts bin bike, and it rocks when you rev it. It was uncomfortable and it's pretty analogue for a 2014 bike, but I love it because it's so quirky. In the past, I had a Ducati Monster S4R, which was also equally nuts. It was useless below 4,000 RPM, handled badly, was a pain in the ass to ride, but I loved it because of its beauty and its flaws. I miss that bike to this day.
Aww.
Dave goes on to say, this character is maybe what we also call soul. And I think it's what we fall for when we love our SV650Ss or our Honda Groms or whatever everyone else is into. Perfection is boring, said Dave from Switzerland, with its chocolate and its clockwork cuckoos, whatever, cuckoo clocks.
And its resolute neutrality in all forms of global conflict.
Yes. P.S. I know it's cheeky, but can you say hi to my best mate Lloyd? Hi, Lloyd.
Hello, Lloyd.
He's my riding buddy and best mate out here. He listens in his truck driving around the Alps. He started listening once you stopped talking about MotoGP.
Oh, good.
Excellent. Thank you, Dave.
Oh,
Good.
That's nice.
Yeah.
I would just like to say for the record that an SV650S has no flaws. And it's certainly not the flaws of an SV650S that I love it for. It's its lack of flaws. It's its sublime perfection, much like your milk chocolate.
Next up.
Andy Williams says, my wife and I, that is, have had R1250 GSs for the last 6 years. They've been around 6 years. It doesn't feel like they have. But, it says they're on their third after the first got stolen and the second got reversed over. And I do the majority of my miles to up and touring. The GS is a fantastic bike, but it's not that exciting to ride, which is why I'd just try riding it faster, surely. Which is why I've kept my Generation 1 FECers 1000 for the last 20 years, and I still really enjoy riding it. That's a man after your own heart, Si. The problem is that the FECer is getting to the end of its economic life. There's a funny thought. It's true. Kind of bikes do get to the point where they stop kind of being worth putting the money into.
Yeah, I guess they do, yeah.
And Andy wants to replace it with something similar for solo sporty riding. The only criteria are that it needs to be fun, comfortable for long day rides, tractable engine, and a little special. The Aprilia Tuono factory V4 looks fantastic, says Andy, and I love the idea of a V4 and its small fairing, but they are pretty expensive, and I'm never going to use 175 horsepower on the road. So he's thinking about Yamaha MT-09 SP or, funnily enough, Honda Hornet 1000 SP. What would you recommend, and is there something obvious that I've missed, or should I just stick with the FECer?
Well, you could always stick with a different FECer, a newer one. What about the second gen, the Gen 2?
Yeah.
There's still some Minters out there.
And that Gen 2 ran on for quite a while, didn't it? It kind of ran on up until, I don't know, I feel like it was still going when the MT-09 was around, so it would have been 20... or maybe not that long, because maybe MT10 would have stood on its toes.
2006, and I think it ran somewhere around 12, 13, maybe. So, yeah, maybe they overlapped. It kind of died when that whole MT thing, the Yamaha revolution, post-credit crunch. But, yeah, they're still out there. There's still some good ones, if you can afford it. For me, I know we've talked about it far too much on this podcast, and it sounds like we're being paid by Triumph. The Tiger 800 Sport is right.
The brand new one?
Yeah, is right in FECer territory. But it's brand new. MT-09, you don't need the SP thing for a start, I don't think. It's great, but it's naked, and so is the Hornet. Is the half fairing important? You don't say, Andy. That would be interesting. If the fairing is important, or I go for, or even if it's not, I go for an R1200R, maybe.
Ooh.
The BM with the screen, or an R1200 RS, again, with a flat bar conversion, one lick, nippy normal, no crazy more. So one of those. There are some crazy deals.
Earlier in the podcast for details.
There are some crazy deals on GSXS 1000 GTs at the moment.
Yes.
That's kind of similar to the FECer. Big, sporty old engine, loads of go in it, comfy riding position, great handling, good platform for making it yours. Not a looker, though. That's kind of about as far as I could get. They're my recommendations.
Yeah, for my money, the closest thing to a modern FECer would be, exactly as you said, something like the Suzuki GSXS 1000 GT or Kawasaki's Ninja 1000/1100 SX.
Yeah.
Big inline four, meaty motor, loads of power, loads of wind and weather protection. Having ridden the two back to back, check out the video on Bennett's Bike Social's YouTube channel. I would comfortably say the Kawasaki is a more sophisticated, polished, slicker, juicier, versatile bike.
Agreed.
But instead, I'm surprised, Andy, that you've gone kind of full naked. MT-09 Hornet.
Yeah.
But, I mean, funnily enough, yeah, like we've said, we've just done a video about the Hornet SP, and Si's got his in-depth geek test video on the Hornet still to come. The Yam, unfortunately, wasn't available for the group test, but we had the Z900 SE and Triumph Street Triple. I really enjoyed the Triumph. I can sort of see the appeal of the Honda, but I think the Triumph's a lovely thing to ride.
Yeah, it's a beautiful creature.
And I know people get a bit obsessed about engine size and claim power outputs and stuff, but dynamically, those three bikes lined up with the keys in the ignition, I'd most want to ride the Triumph. Anything else? I mean, there's tons of other things out there. Everyone's got a bike that's either naked or half faired or fully faired and is somewhere between 800 and 1100cc. Like, everyone's got 2 or 3 in the range, haven't they?
Yeah, there's plenty of them.
Yeah, BMWs, F900s, Rs, XRs, Ducati Street Fighters, old Super Sports, KTM 990 Dukes, SMTs, Triumphs, Street Speed Triples. There's
tons.
Everything. Try them all.
And then go and buy the FECer Gen 2.
Yeah.
Phil Mayo. Is this my turn to read out?
Sure.
Yes, it is. Phil Mayo. Gentlemen, I hope you're both well and in good health, as I'm guessing this may be read out sometime in the distant future. Ha! Phil. Well,
it's only a month or two after.
Only a month or two, yeah. Phil says, after a long time of either not having the money and having the time, or having the time and not having the money, I finally learned how to ride via the direct access scheme for my 40th birthday, bought by my darling wife.
Oh, congratulations.
Nice one. I got my licence and I've been riding for just over a year. Yay! Congrats, Phil. Phil goes on to say, after years of listening to your amazing podcast, hang on.
So which came before the other?
Yeah. How does that work?
You were into bikes. You listened to this for years. It didn't put you off riding a bike. And then you've come and joined us on the dark side.
Oh, Phil.
Well, welcome aboard.
Yeah, what a strange path you've trodden on. After years of listening to your amazing podcast, the time has finally come to send you an email. I've been riding around on a 2003 Triumph Daytona 600. Apart from a little wrist ache after an hour or so, I'm a big lad, I absolutely love it. It's in good nick. It's only done 12,500 miles. But my question is, as I've only ridden a Bandit through my training, my experience with riding different bikes is obviously minimal. What I would like to know of you is, how does the Daytona fare to modern bikes? Is it any good? Is it rubbish? Should I be ditching it soon for a newer bike? What do you remember about it? As it's quite old, I've not found much in the reviews or media content about it. So thanking you greatly, always eager to listen to a new episode. P.S. If Bike Social ever want to borrow or do a bit on older bikes, etc., you're very welcome to have it. There we go. Thank you, Phil.
Before we get into the bike, I'd just like to pick up on the comment about not found much in reviews or media content about it. I think there's a black hole in history which isn't on the internet, right? Because back in 2003, the world was all magazines and newspapers. Yeah. And if you picked up magazines and newspapers from 2003, there would have been tons of stuff about it. But all of that stuff is kind of lost to either history, archives, or people's magazine collections. None of it was digitized at the time. And so if you go onto Google or FaceTube and search for it, you're not going to find anything. But people still have an interest in it. But it isn't online for free.
Ooh, okay.
It was there.
What are you suggesting?
I don't know. I just think it's an interesting thing where up to about 10, 15 years ago, there's loads of stuff. You can put in any bike and there'll be a billion and one. Hi guys, look at me. I'm in the new bike. Which is mostly me and him. But there's loads and loads and loads. But you get back beyond that. You go 20 years ago, 25 years ago. There's kind of not much. We were there.
Yeah. Sort of like a Practical Sports Bikes YouTube channel, perhaps. Gosh, if only.
But it's just going, I remember the time when I did a thing. But I suppose that's what we're doing right now, so shouldn't mock. 2003 Daytona 600 side. Do you remember that?
Sidetracked.
That was right in the middle of your PB stomp and pomp?
2003. That's my second trip back to PB. Yes. Do you know what? I'm pretty sure I've never ridden one. You have.
I haven't ridden a Daytona 600, but I have done a lot with the Daytona 650. It's short-lived, long-stroke successor.
Yes. It's short-stroke, long-lived.
Long-lived, long-stroke?
Strokes, yeah, I was just working that out.
Long-lived, fucking hell, I'm in an absolute state today.
Let's have a quick retread of what a Daytona 600 is. It's Hinckley's first go.
Second go.
The 600? Was there...
TT 600.
The Daytona 600?
Yeah. There was a TT before it, wasn't there?
That's the bike I'm thinking of. There was a TT 600, then a Daytona 600, then a Daytona 650.
For 1 year.
See, look, I didn't even remember that. I thought he was talking about the TT 600.
Well, the TT was the one with the kind of underpants headlights and the two little rocket launcher intakes.
Yeah, it looked like a bit like an Imperial geezer.
It was the first
Stormtrooper.
Fuel-injected,
it was.
600.
Yeah, it was the one that had loads of little fueling floors that
that's
eventually got fixed with ECU updates. And that's the bike I was thinking of.
Well, I think then they put the pointy bodywork on it
They did,
and that was the year that...
Why did they do that?
Was it Craig Jones did well on
Yeah,
one?
yeah. There was a TT1 on it, wasn't there?
Yeah.
But we never knew, because the next year was a 650, and you all kind of went, oh okay,
yeah.
we see what happens. Yeah, you're right. What a bizarre time. Why would Triumph take that chassis and stick a pointy fairing on it? Because, I mean, it must have been effectively the same bike, was it? Or was it short-stroked? Or?
I think it was pretty much. I don't think it was hugely different. I mean, we'll obviously find out if we're wrong, but I guess it was just a styling thing.
Yeah.
Because I think that TT lived for sort of 2 or 3 years, and it wasn't a looker.
No.
By any measure.
And it was kind of all right. It was like bless, it was a good effort,
right?
But it was slightly behind the curve when at that time you had to be slightly ahead of the curve to be in the game, and so it kind of was a bit like their old T595 back in the day. It was kind of really good effort, not quite there, chaps.
Solid attempt.
And then there was this big treading water period where they had the 675 in development, obviously, but nobody knew about it. And then when that came out, that actually kind of played to Triumph's strengths by being different. So its triple engine was its kind of big selling point as opposed to being an inline four. And also that partly was the reason why it was kind of better, inverted commas, than everything else at the time, depending on how you measured it, I suppose.
So
you're talking about black holes. There's a black hole in my memory. I'd completely forgotten there was a 600 on its own.
Yeah.
Christ.
I mean, I think the 650 was only different from the 600 in that it had, I think, a different crank, which would have accounted for the extra 50cc. And I think the exhaust finish was different. Like the silencer finish went from silver to black or black to silver or something. But I think otherwise it was the same frame, same suspension, same brakes. So it's kind of the same thing. So I did have quite a lot of miles on that one in 2005 when it came out. I was far too young and foolish to appreciate it at the time. But I started by doing a group test with it in the south of France as the kind of new boy on bike, brought along because I was cheap and eager and would work 28 hours a day. So it was all the Japanese 600s in 2005 and the Daytona. And the Daytona was very much looked at, unfortunately, by 2005 as the run to the litter. It was the only one with right way up forks and maybe even conventionally mounted brakes at a time when all the Japanese bikes, I think, had all gone to upside down forks and radial brakes. And the Japanese bikes all made more power, and I think they all weighed less, and their riding positions were kind of tighter and much more aggressive. And they were kind of easier to chuck around a track. They were really focused, and it was at the time when basically the sportier you can make a bike, the better that bike is. And all the road testers were kind of young enough and quick enough to overlook things like comfort or how good the mirrors were or fuel range. It was just how fast do they go and how fast they get around a track. So all the other testers loved all the Japanese bikes. And me, equally the runt of the litter, being slow and useless and all the rest, had a fondness, had an affinity for the Triumph, which at the time was kind of the biggest riding position, the most comfortable and kind of the easiest and friendliest. And the two of us just kind of sat at the back of the test looking at all the fast bikes and all the fast blokes over there doing all of their, compression, rebound, whatever. And me and the Triumph just sort of looked at each other and went, all right,
we'll get on with this.
Bit fat and slow? Yeah, bit fat and slow. Should we just, we'll be all right. And we sort of took each other's hand and we kind of enjoyed each other's company, neither of us expecting too much of the other. So I ended up with it as a long-term test bike for the whole year. I smashed it to pieces, high-siding at a Donington track day on my second lap of my first session of my first track day.
No.
It was rebuilt by Triumph still, thank you very much. And I entered it in a twisty sprint at Oliver's Mount at Scarborough and finished second in class out of 2. I later had a leak from the oil sensor. I did a Brands Hatch track day and got moved up from novice to inters and didn't crash. I went to the Isle of Man TT on it. I had a power commander fitted in an attempt to smooth out the fueling, which didn't make a jot of difference. I did an evening track day at Cadwell, had a riot, but started to cook the brakes. I took a total pillion novice on the back who declared I'd go on a bike again, but not that one. I rode it to Calais. I crammed 54 bottles of cheap French lager into the panniers and rode home. 51 made it back.
I remember that, yeah.
I fitted yellow remoulded Tomahawk tyres. I did a December track day at Alton Park on it, on the yellow tyres. I rode it pretty much every day to work for the whole of the year, and I learned how to do second gear stand-up wheelies on it.
Oh, fantastic.
At the time, I boldly concluded it was one of my favourite bikes ever. But with hindsight, I think, of the 20 that I've ridden at that point? Yeah. The arrogance of youth. But 20 years later, I still have a massive soft spot for it. Oh. How does it compare to modern bikes? I think it would still have a strong engine. I think that engine would hold up very well against CBR 650s and even Daytona 660s.
Do you think?
I kind of think the chassis and the brakes probably would as well. I think where the biggest difference, if you were to get a CBR 650, say, and a Daytona 650, what would be the biggest difference? I mean, it would be that modernity. It would be the dash looking a bit dated and the kind of the features and the not having ABS and not having traction control and not having a coloured TFT.
I bet it'd be heavier as well.
Yeah, perhaps feeling a bit lumpy. And I bet the clutch would be heavy because it wouldn't have a slipper clutch or a gripper clutch. And probably, not huge differences. Just sort of polish and sophistication, I'd say.
It sort of depends what your definition of good and rubbish is, really, when it comes to a motorbike, I think. I don't know. I mean, if you put it alongside a CBR 600RR or a ZX6R on a track with the same rider who could explore the differences, then it would be better than it would be behind by an order of magnitude, I'd have thought.
Sure.
But I don't know. In terms of getting a newer bike, again, you haven't really told us, Phil. Yeah, sorry, Phil. You haven't really told us what kind of riding you do, I don't think, have you?
No, but just, I guess fairly new, other than riding a Bandit during DAS and then getting on this Daytona 6.
What about a GSX-R 750? Any of the L models from 2011? That'd be a good step up. Do you reckon?
Could be. No, I think stick with it for a little bit. The only thing I'd be looking for perhaps in a step-up bike, it would be having ABS. I think it's a really important thing, especially for riders in their first few years, to have the ability to fucking hammer the brakes when they need to and kind of have somebody supporting you there.
Yeah.
But, otherwise, I think you've got a really good bike there. It certainly was a huge help to me as a young rider to kind of show me the way of sports bikes without being too aggressive and too peaky and too demanding. So, I hope you have many happy miles on it.
Good stuff. Cheers, Phil. Shall we rattle on with some tales of Good Samaritans?
How are we doing time-wise? Good?
Yeah, we've got a few minutes left.
Right.
We need to rattle some of these off because it's
we
pertinent.
Did. Good Samaritans. We invited the discourse, didn't we?
We did invite the discourse, so we should honour that request.
We brought it on ourselves.
With a response, yes. So this was in response to, I can't remember, remind me, some tales and last feck of being rescued by motorcyclists or rescuing roadside motorcyclists. And I think we invited people to send in their stories of biking Good Samaritans. And the first one is from Martin Darlington, who says, Hello, Martin. He says, in December 94, I was corporal in the army and I had been jiffed, well, I don't know what that means, with Christmas Day Guard Commander at my camp near Bassingbourne in Cambridgeshire. I'd ridden my Suzuki RF600 down to Ashford in Kent to pay a pre-Christmas visit to my goddaughter and her family, and then rode back to the barracks during the evening of Christmas Eve. It was flipping freezing. No heated grips on a sports bike in those days, says Martin. I was on the final stage of my journey and only about 10 minutes from camp when I saw a guy pushing a motorcycle along the road. He heard my engine approaching and turned to look with heartfelt appeal at me as I swept past, wishing I could erase his expression from my memory. I failed to do so, slowed and carefully turned to see if I could help him. Careful, due to the temperatures being pretty close to zero. He'd bought the bike from some bloke out in the fens and nearly made it home when it conked out. I was wondering for a minute then, Martin. It was pleading a Hardgleaves-esque lack of mechanical knowledge. Easy, Tiger. I offered him the use of my mobile phone. It was a very early Motorola flip-bottom phone with a pull-out antenna and a battery that might last 5 or 6 hours, provided you didn't actually use it. But it was Christmas and someone was smiling on us, as it not only had sufficient battery life, but it also had a signal. So the chap, called Kevin, was able to call his dad, who would come to meet him in a van. Kevin insisted I head off home as he'd be sorted very soon. So I went back to try and warm up in my room, feeling pretty good about things. Technology saves the day. Martin says, it's not a very dramatic story, but I remember thinking that if I'd been driving a car and I'd seen someone broken down in the same place, pretty sure I'd have just driven by. There's something of the shared experience. We're all masochists together about bikers. I know I could never have ridden off and left Kevin in the cold, and I'm very glad that I didn't. Nice one, Martin. There you go. That's exactly what we're talking about.
Scott Carpenter says, back in 2008, I was travelling home from Riders Rest in, I can't even say that, Trainac?
Sounds about good.
On my Moto Guzzi, and I ran out of petrol on the A20 north of Limoges due to me being a bit of an idiot. I passed 2 perfectly good service stations, but thought, the next one will do. Unfortunately, there was no petrol at all. There was a strike by the tanker drivers. and more than 24 hours to the next delivery. French, eh? I started pushing the bike uphill on the A20, and a chap on the GS pulled up and asked what was wrong. When I told him the reason why, he said, fucking French. And I said, oh, I better do a different accent, actually. Spoiler alert. He said, fucking French. And I said, but you are French. To which he replied, no, I am from Marseille. We then tried to get petrol out of his tank, but it was no go. So we used his GPS to find the nearest petrol, rode away, and came back with 2 litres in a Coke bottle. He flagged down a bloke on a Z1306 and said, follow him to the nearest petrol, and rode away. I did that, and he dropped me at one of those unmanned petrol stations in the middle of anywhere. He rode away, card not accepted. Try the other card, same result. Then I heard a bike screaming over the hills, and sure enough, he pulled up alongside me. With sign language, I indicated the problem. I gave him €10 cash, and he put gas in the guzzi, then blasted off. Saved by the kindness of 3 French bikers. Égalité, fraternité, pétrolité.
Excellent.
Lovely.
Superb. That's a good one. Thank you, Scott. David Lewin says, thank you for a great pod. Really helps tide me over Swedish winter as the big V-Strom sleeps in the garage. He says, I've got 2 stories of good Samaritans. One was when I stupidly ran out of fuel on my old Tracer 7 after 400 kilometres. Whoa. Parked on the side of the road and called the aid included in my insurance at no cost. Eventually, the man with the can showed up, but before that, I must have waved off 20 bikes who were stopping to help. Warmed my new biker heart.
Oh, that is nice.
Oh, excellent, David. Second time was last year in Latvia. God, you get around. For those that don't know, Latvia is about 50% gravel roads, including some pretty big ones. Latvian bikers are fun guys who tend to ride sports bikes with clapped-out suspension. Well, I was riding along to catch the ferry home when I see an old Deauville with the seat off. Turns out Ivar's bike isn't running, and he's not bought his language skills beyond Latvian and Russian, or his toolkit, or water. Luckily for him, I had tools, and I knew that Koda means water in most Slavic languages.
Wow.
After some very polyglot communications, mainly pointing and words in Russian, German, Spanish and Italian, me and my new amigo realised a fuse had blown and none of my spares would fit. Cue me Googling where to buy new ones and him trying to explain he's texted a mate who's coming out with one. I'm sure he'd have figured it out by himself, but my bottle of water and tools can't have hurt on that very warm day. Made me feel great regardless.
Aww.
Good stuff. Thank you, David.
A lot of running out of fuel going on.
Yeah.
Chris Rexter, I think, used to ride a 2001 Husqvarna SM610S as his main and only vehicle. He says he was young and dumb. One of the many times it let me down was about 15 miles from home, and I was just planning to push it home again. Once I pushed the bike a couple of miles in leathers, in the sun, I started to second guess my plan. A box van pulled up and asked where I was going. The guy was a biker and was moving house. And he was on the empty leg back to his house near where I stayed. Already knackered, I accepted, but I wasn't looking forward to lifting it into the van. I was so happy when I discovered a hydraulic lift. Absolute score.
Nice one.
Another occasion was riding from Bedford to Glasgow in December, and it started to snow. At a refuel around Kendal, I was asked by a fellow Scot where I was heading in the snow. He had a van and a caravan and offered to unhitch the caravan and load the bike into the van. I said I'd rather crack on in the hope of beating the weather. As he was heading to Glasgow too, he said he'd look out for me if it got worse and don't leave the motorway. This was reassuring as the hard shoulder disappeared under the snow around Penrith, and then the outside lanes around Carlisle, and then down to just tyre tracks once into Scotland. Heading up the Beatock summit, the tyre tracks from the truck a few hundred metres ahead were gone by the time I got there.
Oh.
I did make it all the way, but the same guy caught up with me at Hamilton Services. I've offered help many times, but rescue plans have always been underway.
Oh, brilliant, Chris. Or is that KR1S? I don't know. But anyway, nice one. Nice one, Chris. And finally, the last Good Samaritan is George Dale, who says, in June 2024, I was riding south down the M74 in Scotland. Having spent a glorious week riding Land's End to John O'Groats on back roads, I'd left jog at 8 a.m. for the first of 2 400-mile days riding back to my home in London. My 2007 Kawasaki Z750S had performed faultlessly, the screaming inline-4 happily sports touring its way around the country with a tent on the back. Throughout my 3 years of ownership, I'd never been able to shake off the feeling that I could stretch the 18-litre tank to a 200-mile distance with a clear run. You may see where this is going, says George. Do. After 196 miles on the motorway, crouching down behind caravans and lorries, I was feeling optimistic as I crested a hill with the services 4 miles away. 1 mile later, I slowly rolled to a stop on the hard shoulder for the most picturesque breakdown of my life. The bike, laden with camping gear, did not roll in perhaps the way I had hoped, so I called the AA and settled at the top of the road embankment for at least an hour's wait. Approximately 15 minutes later, I spotted a group of 15 or so bikers coming my way, running down the embankment and waving frantically at them. I was relieved when they pulled over to stop. Looking nervously at me, one brave soul rode over and asked what was wrong. Having established I needed some petrol, word went down the line and a bottle of Lucozade, presumably British Standard approved, marked petrol in permanent marker, was passed to the front. The group, wearing matching high-vises from a Wales-based adventure tour, can't recall which one, absolutely refused any offer of payment and rode behind me until I pulled safely into the service station 3 miles down the road. George goes on to say, all that to say, thank you to that group wherever you are. FEC 209 reminded me of this incident and reminded me to make a donation to the Scottish Air Ambulance to repay my good fortune. Fair play, George. The motorcycling brotherhood, including thankfully many women, was at the very least alive and well in 2024. Also, for anyone wondering about the maximum tank range of a loaded 2007 Kawasaki Z750S half fairing, I can confirm I have gathered my own data and it is 196.9 miles. Nice one, George. Excellent.
Sensible consumer advice there. Thank you very much.
Good stuff.
Thank
Good
you,
Samaritans,
lovely Samaritans.
You all. Yes. And
So.
with that on that bombshell,
Oh, look at that.
the music is coming in.
So this is the bit where we get to round everything up. We get to go home.
Hey.
He, Simon Hargreaves. I mean, we all live here at Chatham.
Yeah, of course we do.
Go and share a bed. He, Simon Hargreaves, is available on some social media at Simon H Bikes or at Simon H on Bikes or something.
Don't know, don't care. And he is at Mufka, at MUFGA on the Instas and the
Yeah, that'll
B
do.
Sky Bees or whatever it's called.
Thank you very much to Bennett's Bike Social. Get your insurance from Bennett's. Get your motorcycling content from bikesocial.co.uk and the Bike Social YouTube channel. Get your magazines from
Yes.
Ride Magazine, Bike Magazine and MCN.
Get out there and buy them.
And don't forget to send your emails in to anything at frontendchatter.com.
That's how we do it.
We are, where are we now? In April. We're hoping to get one more in before we go off to the FEC Highland Fling at the start of May. We're less than a month away, Si.
If it's less than a month away, there's no chance of getting one in.
We might get one more in before then.
I don't know. We've got 2 to do while we're there.
Oh, goodness.
Anyway,
it's going to be amazing.
It's going to be amazing.
Thank you very much.
Goodbye. Oh, that was quite a noisy hiss that just appeared then.
It was, wasn't it?